It was meant to be a celebration, senior night, at a high school hockey game at the Dennis M. Lynch Arena in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. But on Monday afternoon around 2:30, gunshots rang out in the stands, sending players and parents scrambling for cover. 3 people, including the suspected shooter, are now confirmed dead, and 3 others are critically injured after what authorities are calling a targeted incident tied to a family dispute. Our state is once again grieving. And today we start our show by unpacking what happened and asking questions about why tragedies like this continue to take place in our community.
Bartholomew Town.
Bartholomew Town is brought to you in part by Half Street Group, who bring a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public... Bartholomew Town is brought to you by Half Street Group, who bring a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience message and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. It's Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Yesterday, as I was heading into the studio to do the radio show in the afternoon, we started to get word of a tragedy unfolding in Pawtucket and spent the afternoon in real time covering what ended up being just a horrendous situation. And look, a lot of people talking about what took place in Pawtucket in the context of on the heels of what took place at Brown University in December. And while these are very, very different incidents in terms of what seems to be, what we know and understand now to be, hard word to use, but intent behind the actions, it was a very different scene yesterday in Pawtucket than what took place at Brown University, where you had an unknown assailant or number of assailants on the run, and you had a security meltdown, at least the perception of it, that was calling a lot of questions or calling into question a lot of practices. What took place yesterday in Pawtucket was less of a community-wide safety threat for a lot of people. It was just a straight-up tragedy. And the idea that something like this takes place at really any public forum is disgusting and displays how unevolved we are as a society and as a species. But folks, let's be honest about it. There's just something extra sinister and extra dark about this taking place at a high school hockey game. And, you know, you can sit back and we could bring on policy expertise to say, well, you know, how do we make moves with whether it be gun control or background checks? So everybody is going to start screaming about mental health on this one. Sure. But then there's also a very legitimate conversation to just ask, what the hell's going on? What world are we living in? And it's become so normalized to have these types of discussions in a news context, in a community context. I mean, there's almost nothing left to say about the issues that were highlighted yesterday. Gun violence, and seemingly a society that has allowed for people who are struggling / in crisis / evil to be properly checked off or given the care that they need. I mean, we're going to see all kinds of people, and we already are, folks. This is already a story on a global basis that has drawn all the predictable commentary, all right? All the predictable mischaracterizations or assumptions. And that's the environment that we're swirling in right now, at least in terms of the top-down level of coverage here. But here's the thing. This incident yesterday, obviously, there is no way to cover it or present it in a manner that can help us make sense of it. You know, sometimes people approach journalism or media or history or storytelling or art or anything in the greater social science category as an opportunity for us to make sense of the world, right? There's no way to make sense of what took place yesterday. And so every statement that's come out from political leaders, while it's perfunctory, it must be done. I mean, the Providence Bruins put out a statement yesterday. I mean, look, there's going to be a predictable PR reaction. There's going to be a predictable policy reaction. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because you've got lives lost for no reason. You've got a now multi-community tragedy that will resonate with the students, the student athletes, the parents, the coaches, the game officials, anybody who's tied to that, the first responders. This is a lifetime now of unpacking the incident. And I think it's okay to sometimes just say, geez, there's nothing else to say. And it's exhausting to take that position because the easier thing to do is to come out of the gate with a million different theories or a million different what went wrong or what's the security vulnerability at this facility. Why wasn't X number of police officers on site? Why was this person allowed into the facility to begin with? If there's any kind of history of tension or family problems, everybody's going to ask those questions over and over again. And I think the only question that we should be asking ourselves right now is, do I have something additive to introduce to the tragedy in this conversation? Not the logistics, not the policy, not use this as an opportunity, as an example to say, well, look, this is what happens when you don't do things the way that I think they should be done. That's where a lot of the coverage has gone, and certainly that's where the opinion has gone. So I sat there yesterday afternoon, and I want to give a shout out as well to some members of the media who, after what we saw with the Brown University incident, when it was a pattern of ego/brand leveling up in at least some people's minds, driving the press conferences and driving the coverage, that's not what I saw yesterday. I'll give an immediate shout out to my colleagues at WPRO, Bill Haberman, news director, Dan York, Kevin McNamara, Doug McGonigal, because the way that was presented yesterday, and also on WPRI 12, particularly Tim White, who displayed, you want to know what a journalist is supposed to do in a moment of crisis? Tim White did it yesterday, and Bill Haberman did it yesterday on PRO. So take note of that as well. Because what we saw in Brown was a disgrace. And it gutted my personal faith in the media at a certain level. And it was totally restored yesterday and then some. Because for a few hours, we're all going through something together. And we still are. And all the news conferences, all the policy decisions, all the statements, all of the commentary or reaction that you're starting to see right now from some of the national figures pales in comparison to the fact on the ground that 2 people are dead as a result of this for no reason. 3 people are in the hospital with critical wounds for no reason. And dozens upon dozens of people are scarred for life for no reason. And there's nothing else to say. We're brought to you by URI Online. Are you ready to take the next step in your career? At URI Online, we offer business and leadership-focused programs designed to fit your life. Whether your goal is to advance your career in fields like public administration, supply chain management, or training and development, our online programs provide the flexibility you need with a high-quality education you deserve. Learn from experienced faculty and collaborate with a network of professionals, all from the comfort of your home or wherever life takes you. Visit uri.edu/online to explore programs and start building your future today. URI Online. Learn anywhere with us. We'll stay on top of this as details become relevant, as anything useful comes out of it. Right now, to me, all there is to do is to listen and grieve and be there for people that may be suffering today, that may be suffering next week, next decade from this thing. It's a terrible incident. The idea that this is a domestic incident that unfolded at a high school sporting event shows you just how far down the tubes we've gone. And we need a mirror like never before, apparently, for this world right now, as if everything else hasn't been enough for people to say, hey, wake the hell up, look around, what are we doing? This incident spooks me, it disgusts me, and I don't know what else we can say about it. Jim Hummel from the Hummel Report and Ocean State Media joins me in just a matter of moments here. We're going to talk about the governor's race. I was on Lively last week on television. You can watch that at oceanstatemedia.com. I was joined by Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, former state representative and Republican candidate for governor, along with Hummel. And we initiated a pretty interesting discussion on the governor's race, picking up on that with Hummel today, because this is a big moment here, folks. You know, it gets a little sleepy in the winter, especially after announcements are made and the state of the state is long since done, and we start to see what the actual political landscape is going to look like from a public-facing standpoint, but also from the standpoint of the movers and shakers behind the scenes are starting to line up. So the question is, what do Helena Bonanno folks as a challenger and Governor McKee as an incumbent have to do right now to move the ball forward in each of their respective campaigns? We break that down with Jim Hummel here on Bartholomew Town right now. Everybody knows Hummel, so an introduction here feels pointless, but if you're that person that doesn't, Jim Hummel, of course, the founder of the Hummel Report, host of Lively on what used to be Rhode Island PBS and is now Ocean State Media. You can read his work in the Providence Journal. You can find it online. The multimedia, independent media leader of Rhode Island, the great Jim Hummel, joins us today to talk about the governor's race. Hummel, it is obviously on the heels of what has been a horrific day and will continue to be a horrific day shadowed by tragedy here in Rhode Island. You know, I thought about our conversation on Lively last week, and this being a moment where the major candidates for governor really have to start thinking about staking their claim. And you had referenced that Helena Bonanno folks might want to think about spending some of that money on television. What's your take right now that we've got two candidates in this thing of a serious nature? What needs to happen for each of those two candidates to establish their lane or their position right now?
Well, I did the math. Less than 7 months, 29 weeks from today, which seems like a very long time, but in a political world, not much time at all. I agree. We had this discussion on Lively. I think that Helena Folks, who's got a lot of money, continues to raise a lot of money, should start spending it to force the governor to have to spend some of his, which he has less money now. He tried to spend it in the last, the Q4 figures that I've raised $1 million. Well, he's still far short. And you look, money speaks in these elections. So the path for each, Helena Bonanno folks needs to reintroduce herself. There are a lot of people who weren't here 4 years ago, or like us are not paying, unlike us are paying attention every day to what goes on. So I think she needs to get out there and at least burn some of that money wherever it is. Now, I will say she's been to the opening of an envelope. I've heard she goes everywhere. And so that has helped a lot because she's not unknown within, you go to the town breakfast or the Democratic meeting or whatever it's going to be. But to the larger audience, I think she needs to get out there. Governor McKee, look, his ratings have gone up a little bit, his favorability ratings. I think the Washington Bridge is baked in to a certain extent. that the numbers are going to be what they're going to be. Does everybody, as they're driving over the Washington Bridge every day, still curse Dan McKee? I don't know. Maybe they've just come to realize it's kind of another Rhode Island disaster that they have to deal with. So I think he needs to get out there to chart a different path, to say, I'm doing this. We're bringing jobs. We're keeping this company here. Because we've had a lot of loss in Rhode Island over the last couple of years. We've lost Hasbro. The bridge has been a big brick around his neck. And here's a little advice if McKee's people are watching. I don't think the opioid thing is going to get a lot of traction. That's my personal opinion. Every time they say something about folks, he says, opioids, opioids, opioids. She was the downfall of all these people. Did she play some responsibility? Sure. But you got to look ahead. You can't look back. I don't know. What do you feel?
Well, I completely agree. I think right now it's a moment where the parameters of this race being Dan McKee screwed up the Washington Bridge, so he's incompetent, and Helena Bonanno folks worked at CVS when there was an opioid crisis, so she's responsible for, the opioid crisis. It's already gotten old. It's not resonating with anybody, and it's at a moment where people are looking around and saying, "Hey, wait a second. Cost of living, energy costs, housing costs, and lack of availability, situations of a variety of natures with healthcare." And more than anything else, I think the key to this election is economic development, where we haven't really heard anything. We haven't heard anybody really lay out a concrete plan as to how we're going to attract medium and larger businesses to Providence or anywhere else outside of the blue economy, which is a niche industry at this point. So I think that's where this thing has gone sideways.
Right. And I think she needs to show, I've been an executive. Look, it's the Bruce Sunland model, right? Bruce Sunland he was running the outlet. He was running these companies. I can translate that to government. And I think she has an opportunity now, because I think a lot of the electorate, look, if McKee gets elected, he'll be the longest serving governor in the term limited era, because he served 2 years of the unfinished term of Gina Raimondo. Are people just tired of the same guy? He could be God's gift to politicians. And at the end of the day, they're like, you know what, let's just get somebody new. How bad could it be? My grocery prices are up. The housing's unaffordable. I think the one thing that's going to be interesting is, in addition to seeing where the money goes and where the unions go, where folks stands on this issue of rolling back the climate change mandates on energy prices. Now, McKee's done a 180 on this, and you have that progressive wing in the legislature that does not want to see any rollbacks at all. He sees this as a path. He says $1 billion over 5 years to be able to save. There are people in that chamber. I don't know what Joe Sakarchi's going to say on this, other than we'll give it due, consideration and have a hearing on it. But at the end of the day, in a Democratic primary, how is that going to resonate? And where does folks stand on that? Short of giving people, now that's one thing McKee can say, I'm going to try to lower your energy prices. Electricity's awful every month. That's one positive thing that he's done. But he's going to get flack from the left because he's going back on those very aggressive act on climate goals.
No doubt. And it'll be tough for him to sell that to some of the climate action groups and some of the progressive groups out there and things like that. But where this could work is if Speaker Sakarchi, and I have made the argument that the Democrat Party in Rhode Island on the whole makes the decision to say, you know what, we're behind McKee, even though we might not walk out and do an endorsement inside the General Assembly, you're going to have either the Speaker or anybody he deputizes going to members and saying, look, there's going to be some compromises on climate. We need you to work with us to a certain extent because we need McKee to keep this program going on the whole. Or is it going to be the opposite, where they're going to say, hey, look, McKee wants to gut all your work. On a sub-rosa level, let's put the party's weight, as in General Assembly members, party officials, let's put the weight on a sub-rosa level behind folks because of potential undoing of the Act on Climate. It's a really interesting and under-discussed discussion or conversation. I think you're right to flag it.
Is labor as important in 2026 as it was in 2016, 2006, 1996? Where does labor fit in your mind?
I think it's still huge, and I think the main reason is because you just have so many people who are scattered out into the community and enter into just a typical space, be it a workspace or I said it on Lively, a 4th of July barbecue or whatever it is, that have most of the time a way higher understanding or way higher level understanding of who the players are in Rhode Island. So they're instructed, suggested, however you want to put it, vote for McKee and support McKee, that's in your best interest as a member of Local 271 or whatever other union. And then they're out in the summer at the beach where they're with 7 people who have no idea who the governor is or who's running or anything like that. And that's a real ambassador on the ground. That's a grassroots ambassador. And for me, that's where the union membership in a Democrat primary and that union support is still most valuable. It's getting the word out on a grassroots level. I'm not sure that it's enough. We'll have to see if that's enough to make the difference when it's all said and done. But McKee definitely needs that union support, I think, to continue his coalition that he's basically already built.
He needs the report. He needs to support what's the juice. Because I think that leadership versus the grassroots have diverged a little bit. You don't have everybody guys have to go to the poll. You know, your boss orders you to go. I think some of the union members are thinking more for themselves now, particularly the teachers unions.
Yeah.
And so look, labor's a little bit different because of jobs and all the money that's come in from the Department of Transportation. You think of all the projects that are going, that helps with the Sabatonis. You know, they're going to be out there urging their membership, but I'm not sure it's the sheep following the shepherd these days in terms of union boss and union leadership. I don't know. That's just my gut feeling, but I guess we'll find out. And remember, it's a Democratic primary. And so I don't know how many people vote. We talked on Lively also about the party endorsement. 4 years ago, Dan McKee was endorsed, but he only got 81 out of the 159 votes. You know who was the second highest?
I think it was Matt Brown, if I'm not mistaken.
Nellie Gorbea.
It wasn't Nellie. Okay, Nellie. Yes, sure.
Yep. I mean, think of how long it's been since we were talking about Nellie Gorbea. Matt Brown and Helena Folks only got a handful of votes. So it shows you how much ground she made up between the endorsement and election day. But you talked about this on Lively too. You don't have unanimous support. Office holders coming out and saying we absolutely support Dan McKee.
Right.
And I don't know whether that's a neutral or whether that hurts him, or I think he's just kind of used to the last couple of years fighting uphill anyway. So whatever, the endorsement, I got to run my own race, right?
Right. And that kind of leads to my last question. Do you sense that McKee is going to try to position himself as, hey, we had all the cards handed against us, COVID, and guess what? We solved it with a vaccine distribution. Schools are problematic, Providence takeover. Well, we got the attendance numbers up. Is he going to try to position himself as, hey, we've been up against it since day one. By the way, Raimondo shut us out when we were lieutenant governor. Now we're governor, and we're keeping that same mentality of trying to kick the door down. Is that effective, or does that seem meek?
I think it's 4 years later. It's a whole different narrative, isn't it? He could come in to say, I got shut out of the meetings. You know, that great ad he had with his mother, who has since died, Willa, playing the cards. And I think now he kind of was looked at as the outsider. Now he's the ultimate insider. He's been in control for it will be 6 years. It's 5 years now, but it'll be 6 years. He's got to come up with a new message. He's got to come up with, why should you stay with Dan McKee when all of these things have gone wrong and he's the one who's overseeing them? You think of the computer problem. You think of those W-2s that went out to the state workers that had the wrong name and the wrong amount. All of that stuff, it seems like every time you turn around, there's another crisis. He somehow has to still preach, I'm the steadying hand, I'm the one who can guide the state. And I think it's going to be an uphill battle. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. Jim Hummel, the founder of the Hummel Report, host of Lively on Ocean State Media. Of course, you also hear him on WPRO from time to time. Read the Hummel Report in the Providence Journal. I mean, is there an outlet you're not involved with of any credibility? You're on the Boston Globe podcast a bunch. Come on. I'm just trying to stay one step ahead of the media wave, Bill. You and I both know about this. They were, when I started in this market years ago, the internet didn't exist. Right. So we're all just trying to navigate our way. But thank you for the kind words, and thanks for having me on today. Of course. Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was good. Appreciate it.